everyone. I am so excited to welcome you back to our second 50 Shades Greener live show. Every month, I'm interviewing someone that has achieved greatness in many different aspects of sustainability. And today I'm very excited and grateful to welcome Conor Spacey to our second live show. Conor is the Culinary Director of FoodSpace, an Irish catering company that are committed to changing our broken food systems and being fully sustainable. With 30 years experience working in professional kitchens, he has always championed Irish ingredients, and he works very closely with farmers and growers throughout the country. He's also part of the Global Chef's Manifesto. He will tell us a little bit more about that later. They have launched the Irish Hub in the fantastic Grow HQ in Waterford. Here, chefs can meet and be part of workshops and discussions on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and implement change into their kitchens with the aim of achieving the goals by 2030. So welcome, Conor, to the 50 Shades Greener live show. Would you like to add or rectify anything from my short introduction?
That's great. Thanks, Emil. Delighted to be here. Great to
You're very welcome. So before we get into all the questions, just to explain a little bit how the show works. It is accessible to all of our viewers on YouTube and LinkedIn, and it is an open conversation. We really want to hear from you, and we wanted to have the opportunity to ask Conor or myself any questions you have towards the end of the show. So we will be sharing with you also a free downloadable document to help you reduce food waste when the show ends, and giving you access to our latest blogs. So let's kick off with a super fast round of 5 questions, Conor. So answer the first thing that comes into your head.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yep. Go.
So, favorite animal?
Oh, horses.
Oh, wow. Mine too. Favorite book?
Oh, cooking books. There's so many different ones. Any cooking book.
Beach holiday or city break?
Oh, city break.
City break. Nice. I prefer a beach holiday. Tea or coffee?
Coffee, always.
Yes, that's the right answer. And the last question, right or left?
Right.
Very good. Okay, brilliant answers.
No problem.
Now, just a quick reminder again to our viewers to please ask any questions you want on the comment box, and we're going to answer as many as we can. So I want to start talking green because I'm really, really fascinated by Conor and the work that he has been doing for many years now. So, Conor, will you tell us a little bit of when did you start working on food sustainability? And I guess, how do you keep yourself motivated to continue working in this area?
Yeah, I suppose I don't know whether it's a good or a bad thing. I'm a long time, well, first of all, I'm a long time working in food. I'm over 30 years working as a chef in many different establishments over my career. And I think it was when I started training as a commis chef, as we call it in the trade, that I really seen food waste firsthand and really noticed. I suppose I came from a background where it was a normal upbringing where we didn't waste anything. We just didn't. It wasn't like we were on a mission not to waste food. We just didn't waste food. So I came from a home where we just ate everything, nothing was wasted. And that was my upbringing. I didn't think that was different. I thought that was the norm. And when I started working in commercial kitchens, I really seen firsthand waste, like in binfuls of waste every single day. And I was never comfortable with it. And as a junior, as a trainee, I suppose there's very little you can do at that time because you don't have a choice. You can't make decisions, or you don't have a voice as such to change what you're seeing. You can raise concerns, but it's not, there's not much you can do in it. But I decided over the start of my career, so over the, about 20 years ago, so about 10 years after training, when I started to move up positions within kitchens and so on, I got to a stage where I was able to make decisions and choices around food and menus. And my biggest thing then was to really tackle not just food waste, but the entire food system. And And that meant a lot of really, for me, really understanding what's wrong and why are we at where we're at, because I think you really need to connect back to food to really understand the problems, because there are many different layers of problems within the food system, and a lot of it can be geographically where you live. It can be, how you live. It can be access to food. It can be climate changes. It's not a one solution for all. And that's something I learned very early. And I thought at the time, this is a way for me to make a change within a food system that my plan was hoping in turn can influence others to see what can be done. And yeah, I suppose, and I always refer back to an article that I found cleaning out my attic at the beginning of COVID, which was in a national paper, which was over 20 years old, the article was, and I was talking about sustainability, food waste and local food, which 20 years ago,
nobody else.
No, and people are probably reading it and going, what is this guy talking about? But, and I suppose, I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, I'm still here talking about it 20 years later. Things have got progressively worse, but also it is now, and everyone knows about it now. There's a huge awareness now around climate change and a food system, because they're all interlinked, and people are more and more aware now than ever, which is a great thing. But also we need to do more quicker. So I suppose we're at that crossroads now where we really need to make these decisions and make them for the good of the planet, as mad as that sounds, but also we have the responsibility to do what's right now, within a business, within your own home, right across the board in everything that we do.
Yeah, I was very surprised, actually. I was reading an article where they had released some information from the USA that food waste was actually worse in households than it was in the catering industry in the USA. And that kind of shocked me, because I always would have imagined or thought that, a hotel or a restaurant will produce a lot more food waste than a household. But apparently the data says different. And that's a very worrying trend, because I mean, like you say, in my house, either we didn't waste anything, and it's not that we were trying to. It was just like, but my mother always said, "You're going to eat those leftovers because we've paid for that."
Yeah.
There was no question about it. Okay, and I'm dying to hear more about Chef's Manifesto, because it's a movement I've been following myself for a while. So can you explain to our audience what is Chef's Manifesto and how did you get it started?
The Chef's Manifesto started, I think it's about 5 years ago. And the idea behind it is, as we know, with the United Nations, there's 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And over 192 countries signed up to work towards reaching these goals by 2030. And for different reasons, we're not on target to reach these goals. And there's a lot of different players and reasons as to why. But somewhere along the line, to help push towards reaching these goals, the idea came up that chefs need to get involved. Because if you think about it, chefs are smack bang in the center of a lot of decisions made around food. We decide where we buy our food, we decide the dishes we're cooking, and what we're cooking, ingredients we're using. And we also, like restaurants, cafes, hotels, whatever, we can influence a lot of our customers as to what's on a plate and why it's on a plate. So the Chef's Manifesto is basically, what it is if you think of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, in each goal there's buy goals. So to actually read the full SDGs, we call them, is a book bigger than the Bible. And I mean, you're not going to give that to a chef and ask them to read that, because they're not going to read it. Let's be practical. Yeah. So what the Chef's Manifesto is it's taking the main areas, what we call the 8 thematic areas, that can help kitchens and chefs reach the Sustainable Development Goals, and at least make big decisions around the carbon footprint, their food, the food system in total. So we got together. There was a bunch of chefs originally in New York, and there was a bunch of chefs originally in London. There's about 12 of us in total. And we worked very hard on breaking down the language of the SDGs into these simple areas that focus on, different areas of the food system, but people can implement into their kitchens. Mm-hmm. That was then launched probably about 4 years ago. And it's now it's in like 120 countries. The manifesto itself is in like German, French, Italian, English, Chinese, and most recently we were in Dubai in February, and we launched it in Arabic as well. So it's this huge community of chefs globally working towards the same goals. But looking at, I think the most important thing I learned from it is that I'm not just looking at a food system locally, we're looking at a global food system. And because there's so many countries involved and so many chefs, like what might be a problem for me here in Ireland might not be a problem on the other side of the planet. They will have other problems. And it's about addressing the entire global food system, but it also gives us a voice. We work alongside loads of NGOs. We work and talk and present to many policymakers and governments and so on about decisions that need to be made for a better food future, if that makes sense. So it's been tremendous the last few years that Chefs Manifesto has been active. It's been a voice at many tables where, a lot of policies are being made, a lot of politicians, a lot of NGOs, all working and trying to work towards the same goals. So it's been brilliant.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you mentioned the fact that you kind of, you take those goals and then you change the language around them to make them actionable for people. Because sometimes, even myself, when I first read about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, my first thought was, well, this is something for governments. There is nothing I can do about these goals, and that's part of what we do with our schools program is we actually bring it down to the students level and say, well, this is how you could align with SDG 1, 2, and 3. And it's about, I guess, I think a lot of the time in climate change conversation, we use language that becomes a barrier for people to understand, and it's how we translate that into personal action. I think that's a really important part, and it's amazing that Chefs Manifesto is doing that. And like you say, chefs have a huge, I guess, responsibility because they have that power to influence other people.
Absolutely, and the good thing about the Chefs, while obviously it's called the Chefs Manifesto, it's written by chefs for chefs. It can apply to anyone. It could be the farmer's manifesto, the people's manifesto. It can be changes you can implement at home, at domestic level.
Yes.
It basically is step-by-step ways to better a food system for all. You know what I mean? And it can be, anyone can apply it to what they're doing. So it works really, really well in that way, and has influenced many people around different changes. And also, we've been a voice for what a real food system and a sustainable food system looks like. Yeah.
We're not there yet.
Not there yet.
Particularly at a global level. I think there's a lot of good work done at local level, but it's a struggle, I think, at a global level yet. And there is so much to change. But just bringing it back to today's sort of topic, how do you build a sustainable menu? Because I'm sure there is a lot of people listening to today that want to know that bit for themselves.
Yeah, and it's a big question. It's a great question. And it's a very big question. And I think you need to start at the beginning. And what I mean is, if you try to do everything at once, you're setting yourself up to fail, if that makes sense, because it can be very overwhelming, and you can trip yourself up. And I think to begin with, as I did, I suppose, as we did within FoodSpace, is we start with our procurement system. So we start with how and what we spend our money on. And if you think about it, whether you're a cafe, hotel, restaurant, when you're in the food business, you have a purse of money that you are spending to buy your produce, to produce food for your customers. There lies your first responsibility, is how and what you are buying. And for us, we really deep dived into everything. And what I mean by that is, yes, the local food is the starting point and the most obvious and probably the most important. And for us, we set up a system whereby each of our kitchens, because we're located pretty much on the island of Ireland, all over the place. So each one of our kitchens were set up to work within their communities. And what I mean by that was identifying, first of all, what is local food. So local food for us is not about knowing a person down the road that sells vegetables, but all the vegetables are imported. That's not local. It's defining what is local. So local begins with food that's here on the island of Ireland, and what you can procure, and how you can work directly with farmers. Many people think it sounds difficult or sounds like a lot of work. It really, really isn't. Like farmers for me are the heroes here in Ireland, on the globe. Farmers are who produce our food and grow our food. And working directly with them is not about me as a chef wanting to produce a dish because I like the idea of it, I like the flavors it's going to introduce, and I like how it's going to look on a plate. That's not a sustainable way of doing things, because the question then is, well, how planet friendly is that plate of food? It's more about asking your farmers, your growers, your producers, what is available now or about to be available, what is at its best, and what can we use. And then when you have a list of ingredients, like a pantry of ingredients, you then produce your menu from that. So as a chef, you're working towards what's available as opposed to what you want to do. And that's where your procurement starts on local food. But then the key also is that if you measure what local food is, like here on the island of Ireland, about 85% say of all the produce we have is Irish. Not everything is, not everything can be. If you think of tea, coffee, spices, chocolate, exotic fruits, we need them. Of course we do. I love coffee, 10 cups a day easily. I mean, it's also about deep diving into where that's coming from. And I'm not just talking about, clever marketing and so on. It's actually getting connected to what is going on. And for instance, I don't know if you've seen it. It was something we did within FoodSpace probably about 2-3 years ago around chocolate. And we started, the reason I'm bringing it up was actually Channel 4 had a great documentary about it last night. And give an example on that, we started investigating palm oil. And palm oil is in everything. It's not, obviously it's not in fresh food, it's in a lot of processed foods, but it's also in a lot of chocolate and stuff that we use on a daily basis. And when I went down to investigating palm oil, I went down to this rabbit hole. It segued into chocolate, and the chocolate industry, when I started investigating that led into child labor, it led into human trafficking, it led into all these human violation of rights, just so we can have a cheap chocolate bar in our shops here. And this is what this is what I mean about a food system and connecting to it, and what change you can make. While that work sounds like a lot, it's not. It's about being responsible. So going back to the question about sustainable menu, I start with procurement and literally look at everything you're procuring. And when you set up a procurement system that works like that, then it's about what you're doing with the food when you procure it. And that's when the waste comes in. And I even hate the word waste, because when we label something waste, we're already admitting that it's okay to throw it away. You know what I mean? In our heads, we're saying, well, sure, that's waste. 85% of all the food that we throw away is 100% edible. And if you think about it like that, I mean, and if you also think from a procurement point of view or an economic point of view, on any catering profit and loss sheets and balance sheets and accounts, there is a margin there for wastage. And that can be, depending, if you're a large hotel with a lot of functions, it can be double digits, it can be up to 10-12%. If you're a smaller cafe, it can lie in around 5-6%. So for talk's sake, if you're a big hotel and you're spending 100,000 euros a month on ingredients, which you could easily do, you're saying it's okay to throw away 10,000 euros. You're actually saying on paper, so if I had 10,000 euros in my office and I set it on fire, you'd all think I'm mad. But yes, I throw it away every month if I'm, depending on what I'm procuring. And so it's about looking at it from a procurement angle, a finance model, because to be a sustainable company, you have to be financially sustainable. You know, it has to work. And then it's about procuring the food and not wasting the food, and really working towards how you use everything that you buy, which in turn saves money. Because when you're tackling food waste, you're using parts of the food and ingredients that you never or don't normally use in our industry. That in turn, you make lovely, you know, pickles and ferments and jams and chutneys and all these different things. That means you don't have to procure them anymore, those condiments and so on, because you're making your own out of food that you would normally throw away, which financially makes you better off as well. So there's a good model that works on how to build a sustainable menu that works for the planet, that works for your pocket, works for the environment, your carbon footprint, and it creates lovely, tasty food, which in turn you can influence your customers on steps that they can do similarly at home. And that's the whole idea.
I'm really glad that you've brought in the whole financial sustainability into it, because, you know, when we work with hospitality clients, the perception of people is always that being sustainable is going to cost me a lot more money. And that's kind of the barrier that many business owners see right now, particularly after coming out of the pandemic. But it's never further from the truth. Sustainability will actually save you money. It's about being more efficient with everything
100%,
including our food waste, which shouldn't be food waste. It should be reused food. But something that has really resonated with me there when you were talking, it's that concept of having a list of ingredients from what's local and available to you, and design your menu around that. Because on 20 years working in hospitality, I've sat with many head chefs and we've designed a menu before we even looked at the suppliers that will be available to give us those ingredients. And it should
that's the norm. You're right. And that, to be honest with you, that is the norm. Chefs in their nature are very creative people. Mm-hmm. So it's very easy to build a menu around food that tastes great, that looks great, you know, that chefs are confident that will make their customers happy and so on. But if you measure that plate in terms of its sustainability and its effect on the planet, it can be probably a lot of the food can be some of the most unsustainable food we're putting on the plate. So it's about looking at it from a different angle. It's about stepping back. Yes, be creative. Yes, create great flavors and so on. But it's about looking at entire ingredients and also what's at its best right now, and working with farmers directly. It's not about just buying food for the sake of it, because in that case, a lot of it is out of season, a lot of it's travel around the world, and it's not the ingredients that are the problem, it's how they're grown elsewhere, it's how far they've traveled, which affects flavor as well as freshness, it affects carbon footprint, and it actually it means there's less of a business for farmers here in Ireland. So we're losing what's on our doorstep just to create a menu that we think will work. And to give you an example, if we think about horticulture and vegetable growers and so on in Ireland, I think it was as far back as about 20 years ago, there was over 600 vegetable growers in Ireland. Today, there's less than 100, and it's dwindling very, very fast. It's a dying business because of how we as the public procure our food, and what supermarkets put on the shelves 12 months of the year, which probably 80-90% is imported. But as consumers, we demand it. We want strawberries in January. We want asparagus in November. So we want to, as consumers, we want to go into a supermarket and we want the shelves to be packed and we want the choice, not realizing that supermarkets are, of course, quite happy to give us a choice because we're spending our money, and they will continue to give us that choice as long as we demand it. But because we demand it, we're contributing to a broken system, and we're contributing to Irish farming losing huge amount of great farmers. And another thing is, like, I travel a lot, and I know that Ireland, the island of Ireland, is the envy of so many countries because of what we can do in terms of farming, because of our climate, our lot of rain, obviously, which helps. But it's what we can produce is the envy of so many countries. And when you talk to these other countries about, well, actually 70% of the food we consume on the island of Ireland is imported, they look at us and go, are you absolutely crazy?
Mad.
You know, and that's the thing. It's so wrong.
It is. And even there is again a subject that we haven't touched on, and that's again our own health, and how our own health can be affected by the food we eat, obviously. But that's a completely different topic, but it's one that is also very present. Actually, Jacinta Dalton from GMIT had just posted a comment there saying that we need to tackle the public procurement system, which is designed to suit the monopoly of cheap food. And that's really, really true. Again, a lot of these things are sort of a policy level, and people like us have very little to say that we can say to change that. But I think things and movements like Chef's Manifesto, that can sit at the table with those decision makers are so important. So just to round it up back to the whole sustainability a little bit, what would you see as the benefits or the challenges of going green for a restaurant owner or anybody like yourself?
The benefits is definitely around building a sustainable food system within a restaurant, hotel, and so on, is also building a sustainable business financially. And as you mentioned, we have a perception that being sustainable and making changes is more expensive. In some cases, there can be initial investments in terms of setting up systems like removing plastic from the kitchens, investing in proper, storage containers and so on. But these things pay for themselves tenfold, within a year, within 2 years, and so on. And there's a huge benefit to having a sustainable system that way. Another thing I've noticed, and especially now when in the hospitality industry, when staff is so short, I mean, everyone is looking for staff, including ourselves. But I find that a lot of chefs that are working with us get very excited about what we do and are happy to leave current positions to come work and learn about a more sustainable model and work within restaurants and hotels that deliver and truly deliver a sustainable food system. Also, in our work, we're contract caterers, so we work with a lot of large companies on the island of Ireland who employ lots of people, and partnering up with them and managing their food system has led for them to also help within attracting new staff to come work for them and so on, because many people now want to be involved in companies that are being sustainable and are really making an effort to reduce their carbon footprint and so on. And more younger people coming into the industry are a lot more aware than people that are years in the industry about what needs to be done, and they're more inclined to work with companies and restaurants, hotels, and so on that are making that impact. And that's huge as a challenge around HR and employing people is a huge challenge as well. In terms of our customers, when we get into working with excess food and so on, and food that would normally be thrown out, what we do is we have a lot of different programs. A lot of it is around pickling and fermenting and so on, which is a very old practice going back to thousands of years. So it's not like we invented this. I look a lot into the past about what I can bring into the future, because we did things better then. And by introducing these systems into our food, we're also feeding people better, because there's a lot of good gut health that is in the food we produce through our fermentation. Good health is also aligned with your mental health. So when your gut health works, your mental health works. So you're reducing your carbon footprint and your waste, but you're also feeding people better in terms of healthier and making people feel better. So the whole thing is interlinked, if you know what I mean. There's a lot of different crossroads and roundabouts interlinked into a sustainable system. But overall, it's better for you, your teams, your customers, and the planet by working on this system.
I get so frustrated sometimes because, probably for people like me and you, it's just like it's so obvious that this is the only way to go, the only way to move on in the future, but we're still battling against huge barriers coming our way all the time. It's one of those things that you just wonder, why isn't everybody doing this? What are we waiting for? Why are we decimating our health, the planet? And
like, you're right. And I think the biggest thing I found is, and this is no disrespect to everyone, like as consumers, we are totally disconnected to our food. totally and utterly. So we don't know what's in season. We don't know what's best to eat and when. And as consumers, we drive forward a broken food system, as I mentioned, by looking for, food 12 months of the year, by looking for my favorite ingredient. I'm here in Wexford, so I'm talking about strawberries. So, at Christmas time, we probably sell more strawberries than we do when they're in season in July, because, it's and we as consumers are driving that. So a lot of it is around educating consumers as to what is key to these changes. It can sound overwhelming, but little small steps within your household can have a huge effect for yourself, for the planet, for your pocket. I mean, if you actually identify the food you throw out at home and put it into monetary terms, you will be blown away. You're talking thousands per year.
I do it every year. I
and it's
look at my
scary.
food waste every year, and I chastise myself for having lost all that food and money. But I've always felt like you about, we have, and I wrote articles about this. We've completely lost the connection with food. And I remember coming back from Spain last year from visiting my family, and I wrote about going to this fish shop near my mother's house, and I asked for 2 fillets of sea bass, and there she comes with the full sea bass, and she says, do you want the head? Do you want me to gut it for you? And I was there looking at this thing, and next thing she started chopping and taking guts out, and there was a small 6-year-old girl running around the shop, and I was just thinking, this is such an experience to be watching this full fish being prepared for me,
Yes.
And the 6-year-old girl was watching and just smiling and asking her dad questions. And I remember doing all those things as a child when we used to go to like rural Spain and see, there was nearly the celebration of the month when we were killing the pigs. And I think a lot of people right now would think I would never let my children see that, because it is quite gruesome, I guess. But I think what it always did for me is that I always felt a connection to the food I was eating. So like chicken nuggets, well, they don't come really from a lot of chicken, but it's important to realize that the food that we're buying in our supermarkets that is nicely packed doesn't look at all like the animal we're eating.
Exactly. Yeah, there's no connection to it.
It makes us lose that relation between what we're eating. Fish fingers don't look like fish. Chicken nuggets don't look like chicken. Beef burgers don't look like a cow. And so it's definitely a topic that I've always been just really interested on, because I just think food is the fuel to our bodies, and we are
absolutely, and it's those foods. You're 100% right, and it's those foods like your nuggets, your burgers, and so on. It's these highly processed foods that are also so bad for us, and that's what's led to a lot of gut illness. A lot of food allergies, where we can't process the food internally because it's so highly processed. There's so many additives and all put to it. And this is where it's like a catch-22 for me, is like the reason a lot of that is done as well is to keep prices low. And what does that mean? So I'm always asked the question, when we're connecting back to food, and we see a lot of food being undersold, below cost price, especially around vegetables and fruits within supermarkets and so on, because they have it there to get you in the door. They'll make money and margins elsewhere on other stuff that you buy. There's a whole process behind it. Is it about making food more expensive? And you know what? 5-6 years ago, I would have said yes, it is about making food more expensive. What I've learned in the last 5-6 years and working more on a global scale on food, that is not necessarily the answer. Because already people don't have access to quality food through money. We can't afford it. So rising food prices actually puts more people into food poverty. So it's not about making food more expensive and we think, oh, it's more expensive, so now I'm going to not waste it, or I'm going to be, I'm going to appreciate it more. And this is where it gets very complicated. Looking at a system globally, it's about everyone having access to nutritious food, not highly processed foods, nutritious food. That can only come from policy change, from governments up to large corporations. If you think about all the corporations and all the food in the world, 90% of all the food in the world is controlled by 3 corporations. So 3 companies in the world are deciding what you and I are eating today and deciding the price they sell it at. And exactly, and only governments and policies will change that. So we have to bring everyone on the journey. It's not just about us on the island of Ireland working in our own little silo and going, we'll be okay here. And, you know, 1/3 of the planet not having access to food and going to bed hungry every night. It's about looking at it globally. And I don't have the answer to that, but I do know that making food more expensive will only widen the net for food poverty. It really has to change at policy level and government level to bring in these changes back to the large corporations that have decided this is your diet, guys. This is what you're eating. It's very complicated.
I'm totally shocked by that fact that there is 3 large corporations around the world deciding the food I'm eating. That's just horrific to me, because I'm 100% sure the CEOs of those companies don't have my health at their heart or their best interest.
100%. And the scary thing is that when we think about monocrops and we think about all the crops grown on the planet, right? And there's 5 main crops grown, pretty much 5, I think it is, on the planet that is grown in abundance and is used right across the world. The corporations that control them also control and hold the seeds to many heritage crops and so on that can be grown, that are better for us and better for the planet, but they don't want us to have it. It's very complicated, it's very political, and it's very much about corporations. And that's another for hours like that. But there's a lot behind us. There's a hell of a lot behind our food system.
Yeah, I'll ask you one last question before I go into the Q&A, because there's a good few questions and comments coming from the public. But what would be your one main piece of advice for any food business owner or manager or chef to adopt more sustainable practices? And you probably answered this before with your ingredients list, but if you had to, you know, if somebody had to adopt one thing today, what would it be?
I think the best thing, and I mentioned before, is not about trying to do everything at once, because you're setting yourself up to fail. It will become overwhelming. And you know what? You'll lose interest within a matter of months. I think is to set up goals for yourself and your business or kitchen or restaurant, whatever it might be, and your home. This applies everywhere. Set up goals, but set up at the beginning. Set up goals that are more easily achieved. And what that means is it builds your confidence about what else you can do. So the harder things are the ones that might take more time. Don't start with them, because again, you'll become overwhelmed. So set up small things around, you know, how I buy better. Let's start with what I'm buying at home or buying within my business, and let's deep dive into that and see how we can buy better. That could be your first goal, which then in turn leads to, as I mentioned, about, well, what am I wasting from what I bought? That can be your second goal. Or you might want to start around something easier around plastic, single-use plastics coming into your kitchens, and how you can work with your supply chain around eliminating that and eliminating it in front of house. But what I found is a good way to keep the momentum going is pick what we call like a champion, someone within your team that will get behind this and be the sustainable champion. It can be a chef, it can be front of house, it can be a manager, it can be any person within the team, and they're the people that really, you know, push for the change, but keep the teams motivated, working towards the goals that you've set out, and working with the teams about how to achieve those goals. Little things like saving power can be very simple, where your energy champion is the person that goes around and turns off lights that's not being used, turns off cookers and ovens not being. These sound like little steps, but those little steps open the rest of the team's eyes to changes that can be made. And, you know, and it's about educating everyone within your team and showing them simple steps first, but communicating why you're making these steps, because it's very important that everyone on the team is on the journey. And it is a journey, you know what I mean? It's bringing everyone along with you.
That's brilliant advice. That's one of the main reasons why I created that Green Manager program, because there has to be someone that is that sustainability champion. And I created that program a couple of years ago, and now say I go on LinkedIn and I see sustainability or green managers being hired all in every industry, really, not just the food service industry. So it is finally become like a real job. You know, it's not something
Absolutely.
that we imagine will happen in 20 years' time. It is happening right now. So that was brilliant.
Great to see.
I could talk to you all day, Conor.
I know, same here.
But I wanted to give a chance to some of the questions from the public today. And just as a reminder, there is a free resource on the chat box as well, where you can download to reduce your food waste. So there was a question coming in from Una, and she asks, Conor, to help us design our home menu, what is in season at the moment? Can you suggest a dish we could make now with local produce on the spot?
Absolutely. You know what? So as I mentioned, in Ireland, we have great food available to us. I think the best to do at home is there's so many different websites, but I know Board Bia are probably one that you can go into, and it gives you a calendar every month of what's in season, what is at its best on the island of Ireland right now. Now, it's mainly vegetable and fruit based, which is important. And from that, you can plan ahead, what you want to make. I mean, we celebrate different vegetables. I know for me, a big one for this time of the year is radishes. Probably very much underused, are banging season right now. And kind of as the weather gets better, I use them a lot in pickles, and I use them a lot in salads and so on. That's just one. We're in asparagus season, where asparagus can seem expensive, but by using all of it, so you're using the tips for your pastas or as a vegetable or a side, and you got your root and skins to make soups and pestos and all of it. There's so many different layers of flavors you can use from one vegetable. So my advice definitely is because it's difficult to know, there's so many different types available to us, is to go on to a website. Board Bia is one that I would use a lot, and it really shows, you can pick on whatever month, you can plan ahead. It's not just right now, and it shows you your vegetables and fruits that are at their best, and that in turn, as a consumer, can lead you to look for these within supermarkets and so on. Because the reason being, unfortunately, while it's great in an ideal world that we all have access to farmers markets and so on, we don't. 85-90% of everyone on the island of Ireland will shop in a supermarket, and that's just how it's going to be. Is that going to change? No. But we can change what's on the shelves by looking to buy what's in season rather than what's out of season. If that makes sense.
That's brilliant advice. I'm going to start checking the Board Bia website myself, because I'm one of those people, I tried Saturdays my shopping day, and rather than go to the supermarket and try and buy from the smaller shops or from the farmers market as much as I can, but it takes me about 5 hours to do my shopping. Because I'm calling to so many different places. So it's trying, I guess, in today's world where everything is like so fast and we have so little time. I can see how a lot of people, I'm blessed to live in County Clare. The amount of producers that I have at my fingertips is amazing. But like you say, many other people don't have access to that type of food.
Exactly,
so Amy is asking, question for Conor, as well as the kitchen staff, how important is it to educate the rest of your team at the business?
It's hugely important. And it was just like I mentioned before about bringing everyone on the journey. Everyone needs to, not just to buy into it. People within your teams, front of house, back of house, right across into the back office and all, need to understand what it is as a business you're trying to achieve. You're starting a sustainable journey, what your goals are, and how you need to work as a team to do it. As I mentioned, the biggest thing is education. It's about educating your teams. It's not about going in and going, okay, guys, we're not going to waste any food from now on. And everyone just kind of stands there and looks at each other. It's about bringing that forward and going, this is a goal we want to reach. This is why we want to reach it. These are ways that we can reduce our food waste and work towards achieving zero waste. This is the difference it can make to our menus, the difference to the business, the environment. So it really is about being very vocal to the entire team about what changes you want to make. And what I found, and has been so good, is that as our teams get more and more involved, so we have a lot of new business at the moment, so we're right smack bang in the middle of training, starting again, because every time we open a new kitchen, we're starting again with a new team. And as you start to show and train and teach, you're opening their mind, and a lot of team that have never been involved before are now coming up with ideas, have now noticed something that can change within the business. So all of a sudden, it's not just you as a person working on this, you have an entire team that are coming back to you and going, do you know what, I've noticed that our energy consumption is high. I've noticed that our biggest food waste ingredient is cauliflower leaves or whatever. I've noticed that, how to reduce our water consumption. All of a sudden, people start to be mindful of what's going on in the business. And we take everyone's advice and everyone's ideas on board, because that's how to push it forward, that everyone is part of it. So it's hugely important.
And I think it's so amazing, you know, the fact, and we see it ourselves when we work with hospitality, is that younger generation, they're the ones that coming up with the best ideas. And
Yeah.
sometimes we make the mistake of thinking that sort of the green team, it's formed by managers, and it should be the opposite. We should allow those, and it brings back to when you were young and, you know, you saw this food waste and you wish you had a voice to speak about it, you know. And it's so
Absolutely.
important
Yeah.
that we encourage our junior team members now to have that voice, because they possibly know about sustainability more than the likes of us, you know.
You're right. It's hugely important, and they're the next generation. And as I always say to the younger people that are starting this business, and I mean it in a global sense, I always say, look, we're a generation of wasters. We've made this problem, and unfortunately we need you guys to help us fix it, because you're the guys that are going to be left with this poison chalice almost. You know what I mean? So it's about making steps quickly, achievable steps that we can make now for a better future for them. You know what I mean? Because we're going to be long gone when we see the real effects of this. But
I used to think that, Conor, but now I'm starting to think that when I'm old and I can't run, that's when there's going to be huge issues in climate change. So I'm not looking forward to that, I must say, because climate change has accelerated a lot faster than we initially anticipated. So it's not anymore like our children's generations. It is very much ourselves and our own children who are going to suffer this. I like to conclude with a lovely comment from Tracy Daly, who's a food business coach. And she says, I reviewed a kitchen last week and saw an extraordinary amount of waste. The chef was in fight or flight mode, so was mass producing food, over ordering based on fear of not having control. It is a side effect of COVID, staff shortages, lack of control measures, fear, and bad habits. The teaching and education aspect is crucial for change to occur. It is an area that is in turmoil, but as Conor says, it is one step at a time. So, yeah, thank you very much, Tracy. It is, I think, you know, I think we all go back to the same conclusion, where education is a key part of this, because you can't change what you don't know is wrong. You know, you can't make a change if you don't know that there is a better way of doing things. And so I just think it's so important. I follow your Instagram channel with a lot of detail, and I love when you're showing, because I had never done a lot of fermentation or anything like that. And then I started watching your Instagram account, and I tried a few bits, and I'm not that good at it.
Great.
I'm going to have a chat aside with you for this, so I can get better at it. So any parting comments, Conor, anything else that maybe we haven't been able to cover on the questions?
I think the biggest thing is, and I did mention it, is about deciding to start your journey. If it means baby steps, make the baby steps with a bigger goal to achieve. For instance, like as I said, in the last few months, we've opened a lot of new business. So we have a lot of new teams on board, a lot of very busy cafes and so on. While our older teams and more existing business are years ahead of our new business, I don't have an expectation to go into a new business and go, bang, you're part of FoodSpace, or now overnight all it's going to happen. I set out a goal again within the next year to bring that business up to the level of the older businesses that have been doing it longer, because we're all human. It has to be stepped out. It can't change overnight, but you have to make the decision to make the changes and stick with it and be determined for the better of all of us. You know what I mean? And I think that's the thing. It really is about sticking to it and communicating to all your teams as to why you're doing it and the end goal for everybody.
That's a brilliant piece of advice. You know, always set up your goals, break them down step by step, and commit to the changes you're making. Yeah, I feel like you're my kindred spirit, to be honest. We speak the same language. So thank you to our audience for joining our second 50 Shades Greener live show. Next month, we're going to be talking about luxury sustainability in hospitality. And of course, you can find out more details in the website, 50shadesgreener.ie. And so happy that I've met you, Conor. I'm going to continue following you. I'm sure we'll be doing a lot of work together in the future. And yes, thank you everyone for joining us, and I'll see you next month.
Thanks, guys.